361. What is sacred? 7 days later, Twin Light Hill was crowded. Where once two lights had faced each other in silence, people now pressed the slopes, believers and nobles from Silver Sail City, commoners and soldiers from the Dawn Kingdom, and mercenaries, merchants, and spies who had come from across the southern territory. Tens of thousands of eyes fixed on the hilltop. On the west side stood Saintess Seraphina in an ornate priestly robe, a platinum scepter of judgment and divine authority in her hand. A retinue of red-robed cardinals and Templar knights formed a solemn backdrop behind her. A soft white radiance seemed to pour from her, as if she were the holy light made flesh, the living symbol of the old order. On the east side, Jason wore a plain arcanist robe, simple, unadorned. Only one person stood behind him, Sirius Black. Sirius kept his hands clasped behind his back, chin lifted slightly, expression arrogant. A faint sneer played at his lips, his stance broadcasting absolute confidence. Above the hill, the sky itself split into two. To the west, a sea of holy light clouds. To the east, a brilliant golden dawn. The contrast was sharp and deliberate, the perfect stage for a theological debate that would decide faith and define orthodoxy. Seraphina spoke first. God loves the world. His radiance shines upon the earth, regardless of status or race. Her voice was pure and distant, amplified by divine magic until it touched every ear, carrying a consolation that steadied hearts. All people bear original sin and are mired in suffering. Only by holding the most devout faith, offering your soul to the supreme holy light through daily prayer, can you cleanse your sins and obtain grace and salvation. Her cadence had a liturgical rhythm that turned countless faces below the hill passionate. Many knelt, whispering prayers as if feeling a tangible descent of grace. Then Seraphina's gaze fixed on Jason. You steal the power of light and bewitch mortals. Do you know your sin? Jason waited until she finished, then answered. His voice lacked Seraphina's divine amplification, but, bolstered by a simple spell, still carried clearly to the crowd. May I ask, Your Holiness, when a hungry believer prays to God, should God hand him a fish to fill his belly, or should he teach him how to cast a net and fish so that he will never go hungry again? The question landed like a stone in a still pool. The fervor that had gripped the crowd faltered. Those who had been kneeling looked up, puzzled. Onlookers across the hill exchanged thoughtful looks. Even Seraphina hesitated. This was a question too simple to be simple, sharp enough to pierce the armor of doctrine and strike the root of reality itself. Before she could marshal a response, Jason continued. The sanctity you preach differs from the light of dawn. His tone tightened. A true God should not sit aloof, demanding faith and offerings. He should be a pioneer, a guardian, a mentor, someone who teaches, opens the way, and leads civilization forward. The light of dawn never demands blind prostration, and we do not teach that humans are born corrupted. We teach people to understand the world, to grasp its laws, to create value with their own hands, and to take control of their destiny. We teach farming techniques so fields yield more food. We provide basic education so everyone can read. We establish laws that reward effort and discourage vice so society grows fairer. His words landed like a hammer on every common ear. Compared to promises of vague salvation after death, Jason offered a future people could see and touch. Empty words. Anyone can say them. Seraphina replied coldly. How do you prove that your path is more sacred than the holy light? Very well. Jason seemed to have been waiting for the challenge. He swept his gaze over the crowd and pointed to a corner. That old soldier with a crutch, please come up. Eyes turned. A white-haired, weathered veteran was pushed forward through the mass, limping. One leg was clearly atrophied. He moved with difficulty. I am Gray, a retired sergeant from Silver Sail City, the old man announced, embarrassed but loud enough for all to hear. This leg was cursed and crippled 10 years ago on the battlefield against the orcs. I have prayed to the holy light every day since, but the priests said my faith was insufficient, so I could not be healed. Several bishops behind Seraphina visibly tensed at the man's words. Under the view of tens of thousands, Jason withdrew a plain wooden plaque from his robe, no larger than a palm, and handed it to Gray. The plaque bore only a few simple lines carved into it, forming a rune none could recognize. This is not a gift, Jason said. This is knowledge. I will teach you how to use it. Concentrate, feel the faint vitality within your body, then try to channel it into this rune. Gray took the plaque with a mixture of doubt and desperate hope. He closed his eyes and did as he was told. Sweat stood on his brow. It was clearly difficult for him. Then, a few seconds later, a small miracle unfolded. The rune on the wooden plaque glowed with a faint green light. A gentle life energy flowed from the plaque into Gray's atrophied limb. Under the incredulous eyes of the crowd, his withered muscles twitched, blood seeming to return beneath dry skin. A dark, viscous mist was expelled from the wound and dissolved into the air. Ah! Gray groaned, feeling a long, dormant itch. He tossed away his crutch and pushed with both legs. He wobbled, but then, under the gaze of tens of thousands, he stood upright. I'm standing! I stood up by myself! Gray cried, tears streaming down his face. Silence broke into a thunderous roar. The crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, worshipful cries. A miracle! This is a true miracle! He didn't pray, he healed himself. This is the God we need. Thousands fell to their knees. But their worship was no longer fixed on the sky. Their adoration turned, fanatical and ecstatic, toward the man on the hill who had handed them knowledge and hope. Above, the sea of holy light representing Seraphina churned and dimmed, its radiance ebbing as if being suffocated by the new dawn. Seraphina's knuckles whitened around her scepter. Her body trembled. The faith that had sustained her life had been split open by a simple question and an undeniable miracle, leaving a huge rift. Jason had won the debate. 362. Faith surges, ready to go home. The debate at Twinlight Hills had ended, but its ripple was only beginning. Jason's question: give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. And the image of old Soldier Gray standing tall before thousands, relying on knowledge rather than charity, had struck the very foundations of faith across the Southern Territory. Word spread fast. Shrewd merchants sold magic crystals containing recordings of the scene to distant kingdoms for high prices. Bards stitched the moment into a song overnight, the divine debate of Twinlight Hills, and it was hummed in every tavern. He asked the saintess, when hungry, would you rather have a fish or a net? He let the old soldier stand on the high ground by himself. He brought knowledge and hope. His name is Jason. He is the King of Dawn. The song's simple lyrics and catchy tune made it popular in every city within days. The Dawn Kingdom, once a rebellious backwater, had become a symbol of new hope. Jason, however, had long since returned to the Chamber of Secrets in Lionheart City. Fame meant little to him. He measured the victory by the practical power it could buy. He sat cross-legged, closed his eyes, and expanded his domain perception. What came flowing to him was vast and unprecedented, a tide of faith drawn from every direction, passing over mountains and rivers toward the Dawn Kingdom and toward him. It was not a single stream, but a complex, pure current. He could see how each source contributed. Old Soldier Gray and his family pouring out gratitude and reverence. Farmers and blacksmiths from literacy classes offering hope and a hunger for learning. The kingdom's soldiers lending faith in protection and glory. Worship and respect. Thirst for knowledge, gratitude and aspiration, not blind submission, but positive emotions rising from countless hearts, were converging into a tidal wave of belief. The quality of this faith was unlike anything Jason had encountered. If ordinary divine faith was murky river water, this felt like crystal spring, clear, invigorating. It flowed into him without distraction, cleansing rather than clouding his mind, sharpening his spirit. He let it wash over him. Sirius's voice called from outside the chamber. Jason, the saintess requests an audience. Jason opened his eyes and raised an eyebrow. He found Seraphina in the castle study a short while later. She had removed her sacred priestly robes and now wore a plain scholar's gray robe. The halo of sanctity was gone. In its place was the humility and puzzled eagerness of someone pursuing knowledge. Her sky-blue eyes shone with curiosity. Your Majesty, she said, bowing and using a secular address. I apologize for my previous offense and my intrusion. Jason waved for her not to be overly formal. Seraphina straightened, took a breath, and made a decision that surprised everyone. Your teachings have opened a new door for me. I want to stay. She clutched the corner of her robe as if steadying herself. I request permission to remain in the Dawn Kingdom as an ordinary scholar, to study your new theological system. I will not meddle in government affairs, nor will I preach. I only want to understand how knowledge becomes power. Instead of returning to the city of holy light to face judgment, she chose to remain in what many called a heretical kingdom to pursue the truth she had glimpsed. Jason looked into her eyes, saw nothing but an honest thirst for knowledge, and after a few seconds of silence, nodded. I agree. The Dawn Kingdom welcomes any scholar who sincerely seeks knowledge. Seraphina's choice, once the Church's trump card, had, by her own action, implicitly acknowledged the Dawn Kingdom's legitimacy. That recognition would do more to diffuse external threats than any battle could. After seeing Seraphina off, Jason summoned Sirius and Marcus. All future government affairs are yours, he said without leaving room for argument. I am going into seclusion. No one is to disturb me until I re-emerge. Having secured a theoretical victory and a huge influx of faith, Jason intended to convert it into the power he needed to break through. The stone door of the Chamber of Secrets closed behind him. He sat once more, with no reservations this time, and let the massive faith energy burn inside him. He fed the surge with every high-grade resource he had, soul crystals humming with spirit energy, moonlight grass steeped in lunar power, and other rare materials. Faith acted as the perfect catalyst. Resources that normally would take months to assimilate were now rapidly decomposed, purified, and absorbed. A tremendous current swept through him, rebuilding his body cell by cell. His soul swelled under the nourishment, his mind sharpened, and the magic vortex within him swelled into a true golden ocean, throwing up monstrous waves. Tier 3 advanced. Tier 3 perfected. In hours, he covered ground that arcanists spent lifetimes pursuing. When the last soul crystal had turned to dust, the roaring ocean of energy inside him reached a perfect peak. His body and soul were filled to the limit. Any more, and the balance would shatter. Tier 3 perfected. All prerequisites for breaking into the Tier 4 legendary level were in place. Inside the chamber, Jason opened his eyes. Two bright golden lights flared in his irises, as if they could burn through the void. He could feel the world's rules pressing back, repelling him, an unmistakable warning that this realm could no longer hold him. Forcing a breakthrough here would be fatal. He spread his palm. The realm stone he had long treasured, pulsing with spatial fluctuations, appeared in his hand. Jason gripped it and spoke softly. It's time to go home. 363. Farewell, my king. The stone door of the Chamber of Secrets rumbled open and slid aside. As Jason stepped out, Marcus and Sirius, waiting just beyond the threshold, felt a weight settle over them. Jason's appearance had not changed. He still wore his arcanist robe, and there was no visible fluctuation of power about him. Yet the field of force surrounding him twisted reality. He stood like the center of the world. The air around him thickened, light bent as it passed, and tiny golden sparks of electricity danced in the shadow beneath his feet. It was a suppression born of a higher order of being. Sirius's pupils narrowed. He was already one of the realm's great powers, but before Jason he felt his magic slow, as if he were a child at the foot of a mountain. Marcus felt it more acutely. The channel of faith that bound him to the Dawn Kingdom sent a single, undeniable signal of submission. He dropped to one knee and bowed his head, unable to meet that figure. Faced with such overwhelming pressure, thought of resistance vanished. Only awe and obedience remained. Rise, all of you. Jason's voice was calm. The pressure evaporated the moment he spoke, as if it had never been. Sirius exhaled, feeling cold sweat break along his spine. Gather all core members for a meeting in the Grand Council Hall, Jason ordered, then turned and walked away. Half an hour later, in the Grand Council Hall of Lionheart Castle, the Dawn Kingdom's core officials sat upright and solemn. Chief Knight Sirius, the newly appointed Bishop Marcus, the Church's beak in charge of intelligence, the head of the technical administration of goblin and dwarf craftsmen, and several human legion commanders were present. Jason took the main seat, his gaze sweeping the room. I will be leaving for a time to complete an important breakthrough, he announced. The words landed like a strike. Surprise rippled through the assembly. The Dawn Kingdom had only just found its footing. How could the king leave now? During my absence, the kingdom will be governed by a regency council. He left no space for argument. He looked at Sirius. Sirius Black, I appoint you chief regent and supreme military commander of the kingdom. You will oversee all military and governmental affairs with final decision-making authority. Sirius rose, took a steadying breath, and bowed, hand to chest. As you command, my king. Marcus, you will be responsible for religion, law, and the education of new citizens. The tenets of the Dawn Kingdom, knowledge at their core, must continue to be advanced. Marcus stood and accepted the charge with quiet dignity. I will see it done. Church's beak, Jason continued. Your Qianren will remain responsible for intelligence and surveillance, eliminating any who challenge the new order. The black-robed figure in the shadow inclined a slight bow. The administration will carry on reforms in education, industry, and agriculture. When I return, I expect a more prosperous and powerful kingdom. With a few clear orders, Jason assembled a governing corps capable of keeping the realm steady in his absence. Military, faith, administration, and intelligence all assigned. He dismissed the meeting with a wave and, as the others filed out, stayed on only with Sirius. Jason produced a scroll of dark golden dragon hide and handed it to his friend. At first, the surface seemed blank, but when Sirius took it, the scroll felt like a thundercloud in his palms. A tingling numbness spread through his fingers. This is a demigod domain scroll, Jason said softly. It seals a full power strike of my thunder prison. It can wipe a city and the sky above it off the map. It is your last resort, for you and for the kingdom. Use it only so that it never has to be used. Sirius's face grew grave as he felt the dormant cataclysmic power contained within. He carefully sheathed the scroll. I understand. I will guard the king's property until his return. After settling the realm's affairs, Jason went alone to the deepest, reinforced chamber beneath the castle. The space had been turned into a vast laboratory by his alchemy. He drew a steadying breath and took out the realm stone. He intended to build a one-time, ultra-powerful interdimensional beacon to open the way home. He set the realm stone at the center of the magic circle, and it floated. Jason extended his right hand, and golden magic flowed from his fingertips like liquid sunlight. He began to carve the first rune into the obsidian floor, a complex sigil for folding and distorting space. Rune after rune poured from his touch, tracing an enormous star map-like framework across the stone. Then, with his left hand, he called on the divine power of the world. Runes of golden faith poured like lava into the channels formed by the arcane symbols. Two fundamentally different, almost opposing forces were forced together under his will, merging into an unprecedentedly intricate array. Massive amounts of magic and faith were drawn from his body and poured into the construct. The chamber trembled, sparks crackled in the air, and the runes on the walls blinked on and off. Hours passed. When the final rune was set, the array, over 20 meters across, glowing with brilliant gold and deep blue, was complete. Jason turned to Sirius, who had stood guard at the doorway through it all. His most loyal friend's eyes were rimmed with red, but his mouth held a proud smile. I leave this side to you, Jason said. When you return, our journey will be to the true sea of stars, Sirius replied. I will wait, Sirius added, and Jason nodded. He spoke no more. Firmly, he walked to the center of the array. In my name, activate the beacon. He placed his hand on the floating realm stone. It burst into blinding light as the spatial energy within it ignited. The array thundered to life. Runes flared, forming a pillar of light that stabbed upward. Space at the apex was ripped apart by an irresistible force, opening a rift. A stable light gate, humming with familiar magical fluctuations, formed. Through it, one could dimly see the castle's spires bathed in moonlight, an image both close and impossibly distant. Jason stepped into the gate and was gone. The aperture contracted swiftly behind him until it winked out entirely. Only Sirius remained in the vast underground chamber. He clutched the still warm scroll to his chest and looked up through the layers of stone as if trying to see beyond them. A kingdom without its king. A new era to guard and to forge. He drew in a slow breath and steadied himself for what lay ahead. 364. The king returns and becomes a legend today. Above Hogwarts floated the City of Dawn. A fusion of arcane and magic, it drifted in the clouds as always, powerful currents of power streaming through its structures. The central control room was dim, rune arrays on crystal walls flickering softly until a shrill alarm shattered the quiet. Buzz! The room flooded with red light as streaks flashed across the crystals. A mechanical voice cut through the noise. Warning, warning, powerful spatial fluctuations outside authorization detected. Energy level assessment in progress. Assessment failed. Target energy is too high, exceeds the world's upper limit. Coordinates locked, center of the main control room. Repeat, coordinates locked, center of the main control room. For the first time, Zero Golem, the city's central hub, sounded urgent and distorted as its warning echoed through every array. The highest alert had been triggered. It was the first time the City of Dawn had ever reached this level. Hermione was the first to burst into the control room. Her white researcher's robe was rumpled from running, chestnut hair escaping its pins. She'd only just set down a research report. Her face was tight with tension, but her eyes shone with hope. Dumbledore and Snape arrived next through the Flu network. Dumbledore's expression was grave, azure eyes unusually sharp. Snape's hand was already on his wand, black robes billowing, jaw clenched. Harry and Ron sprinted in after them, breathless, followed by the Weasley twins. In seconds, the core members were assembled around the central area, watching the space itself warp and tear as if something were forcing its way through from another world. Rifts spidered across the floor and walls, converging on a single point until a glowing, edged portal ripped open. A figure stepped through. He wore a simple Arcanist robe. His face was the same as always, but his golden eyes carried a majestic, indifferent calm. Seeing everyone's anxious faces, a genuine, almost long-lost smile touched his usually impassive features. "I'm back." The tension in the room eased at once. "Jason!" Hermione was the first to react. She cried out, rushing forward and throwing herself at him, clutching him as if to never let go. Tears poured down, soaking his robe. Jason patted her back, feeling the weight of her longing. "I'm sorry I made you worry," he whispered. Dumbledore and Snape, however, stood frozen. Jason before them no longer fit their concept of a wizard or even an arcanist. He had become something else. A powerful, oppressive presence rolled off him, killing intent, royal majesty, the bearing of a king. Beneath his calm sat a depth of magic they could scarcely fathom, a force that seemed capable of reshaping the world. "Monster," Snape hissed through gritted teeth, the single word betraying his shock. Dumbledore drew a breath that mixed relief with excitement. Jason comforted Hermione, then looked over the gathered friends and gave a brief account of what had happened in the other world. Gods who existed there, the founding of a kingdom, his coronation as king, and a theological upheaval that overturned faith itself. Harry and Ron stared, mouths open, as if they'd been told some unbelievable story. "So, you were a king in another world?" Ron stammered. Jason nodded but did not dwell on it. He grew serious. The regal pressure returned, and the air in the control room seemed to chill. "Enough small talk," he said. "I've reached my limit in that world. If I stay another second, the world could reject me. I have to break through to the Fourth Order immediately. Today I attempt to reach legend." He fixed each of them with a steady look. "I need all the power of the City of Dawn to protect me." The room fell silent. This was no ordinary promotion. Breaking into legend was a term from the oldest textbooks. Dumbledore reacted first, his face folding into a complex mix of awe and relief. He knew how monumental this could be, the greatest breakthrough in magic since Merlin. "Zero!" Dumbledore's voice rang out, steady and commanding. "Activate the highest war protocol. Cut all non-essential power to the City of Dawn and transfer everything to the Central Energy Core Cultivation Chamber. Engage the Ale Rune Shield at full output. I want this city an impregnable fortress." "Yes, City Master. Yes, Professor Dumbledore." Zero Golem answered. A low hum rose through the city. Countless golden runes unfurled from the base of the City of Dawn, climbing and sealing the city in a radiant dome. From below, it seemed like a suspended golden sun. Jason did not waste time. He walked toward his private cultivation chamber deep within the central axis, directly linked to the energy core. Hermione, Dumbledore, Snape, Harry, and the rest of his closest allies fell into step behind him without a word. They took positions before the massive alloy door of the chamber, wands raised, forming the final line of defense. Everything was in place. A legendary ascension, one that could reshape the history of magic and even the world's balance, was about to begin. 365. Breakthrough. The entire magical world was shocked. City of Dawn, Central Energy Core Cultivation Chamber. At the heart of the floating city, where arcane runes met alchemy, Jason sat cross-legged on the energy crystal platform, eyes closed, breath slow and steady. He did not sit in an empty room, but inside a revolving sphere of sigils. The walls, floor, and ceiling were etched with countless miniature runes, composing the primary energy network for the entire city. At Dumbledore's command, the city's defense towers and alchemical forges funneled their stored power here. Purified magic swelled in from all directions, coalescing into a visible, milky white mist. It thickened into a viscous liquid and swirled around Jason, enveloping him in an energy cocoon over 10 meters across. Immersed in that pure power, he felt every cell extend and open. This was his own magic, the force of the city he had built, accepted without resistance. In the other world, he had to be cautious, lest he attract the attention of reality's rules. Here, in his own domain, he could drop that restraint. Jason calmed his mind and looked inward. He found the mental shackle he himself had placed, a limiter meant to prevent rejection by the foreign world, restraining his immense power. Open, a single thought. The restraint dissolved. The magic he had held at the edge of his capacity lost its containment and erupted. A roar tore out from his soul as the torrent of energy the city had accumulated for years found an outlet. It surged into him, assaulting the bottleneck of the third-tier great perfection. That barrier, which could imprison many an archmage for life, cracked under the onslaught in less than a minute. A hairline fracture appeared, then webbed out, and in the next heartbeat, the bottleneck shattered into motes of light and scattered. Vast power began to transmute within him. The vortex in his dantian, his energy center, widened and spun faster, reshaping body and spirit. At the same time, the Grand Sun Codex buried deep in his soul shifted. Its pages turned without wind, golden runes leapt from its text, materialized, and fused into his magic. They permeated his spirit and left impressions on the source of his soul. Every fragment of his power took on a faint golden sheen. Jason sensed a fundamental change. His magic was no longer mere raw energy. It was starting to take on the quality of law. Power had become law. If he willed it, fire might lose its heat, water could flow upward, solid matter could be formed from nothing. This was the incipient form of a god, the first spark for igniting divine power. As Jason underwent this leap, the sky above the Scottish Highlands convulsed. Centered on the City of Dawn, elemental forces within hundreds of kilometers were forcibly awakened. Fire, water, wind, and earth, free energies from mountains, lakes, seas, forests, and soil, were drawn up like tributaries. They formed rivers of raw element that rushed toward the heavens, coiling into a colossal vortex over the land. The city itself blazed at the vortex's core like a sun. Brilliant auroras blinked through cloud and mist, thunder rolled deep within the spiral, and fierce winds howled through the glens. The British wizarding world was thrown into alarm. In London, Ministry of Magic, Sub-Level 9, Department of Mysteries, chaos reigned. Sirens screamed through the sub-basement as dozens of instruments that tracked national magical fluctuations went wild. Their needles slammed to the stops, and then the devices blew, gears and crystal shards scattering across consoles. Good Merlin, what on earth is that? A silent one in a star chart mask cried. We can't calculate it, another answered, voice shaking. Fluctuations have exceeded every instrument's limit. Magic concentration over Scotland has risen 10,000 times the norm in 10 minutes, and it's still climbing. Report to the minister. No, directly to the Wizengamot. This is enough to destroy the entire British wizarding world. Have we reached the end? Panic tinged every word. In the minister's office, the fireplace flames flared and a department head burst through, etiquette and poise forgotten. Minister, something's happening above Scotland. What is that? A miracle. No, the wrath of the heavens. Back at the eye of the storm, inside the cultivation chamber, Jason opened his eyes. Twin golden beams shot from them and struck the alchemical alloy wall, boring two smooth holes through material strong enough to withstand legendary spells. A pressure, unlike anything any archmage could muster, a pressure worthy of a legend, swept through the floating city. Outside the chamber, those on guard felt it as a chill crawling up their spines. Snape's face drained of color. He stumbled back a half step, wand hand trembling. His meditative training, his breath of spiritual poison, was ringing loud alarms in his mind. He felt rendered immobile before an irresistible force. Dumbledore, uncharacteristically straight-backed, watched with wide eyes that could not conceal disbelief. This was beyond even his memory of Grindelwald at his peak. Harry and Ron felt it most viscerally. Their legs went weak, they clung to a wall to stay upright. Magic itself seemed to pause within them. The pressure was crushing, but carried no malice. After a stunned moment, understanding spread. They all realized what had happened. Jason had succeeded. Inside the chamber, Jason rose slowly. He stared at his hands, aware of the new, law-imbued power flowing through him. He gently clenched a fist, and the air around him rippled. He had taken the fourth step. He had entered the fourth tier, becoming the first god-level being in this world's history. And this was only the beginning. The heavy chamber door ground open on mechanical gears. Jason stepped out of the lingering golden haze into the faces of his companions, eyes alight with excitement, reverence, and awe. Hermione's tears glistened as she smiled. Pride and love overflowed in her expression. Dumbledore's eyes held relief and exhilaration, a quiet handing over of hope. Snape's features were a conflicted map of shock and bewilderment. Jason nodded calmly as the immense pressure drew back and folded into him. His gaze settled on Dumbledore, deep and far-seeing, as if it pierced the dome of the City of Dawn and looked beyond. "Headmaster," Jason said, voice steady and strong, "my strength has stabilized. Now I need your help. We must begin building a permanent, stable, two-way Stargate." With the birth of a newly ascended legend and a plan to bridge worlds, a grand chapter in both their futures had officially begun. 366, just upgraded, and it came back to life? The Grim Reaper is here to push for KPIs. The strange phenomenon that had followed Jason's advancement to legend status slowly ebbed as he steadied his aura. The energy vortex that had torn above the Scottish Highlands dissipated, the wild, roiling elements of magic calmed. Still, the City of Dawn remained charged with a restless energy. In the central control room, nobody could speak, too stunned, too exhilarated. The mood was electric. Hermione still had tear marks on her cheeks, but she smiled with a radiance that lit her face. She pressed herself against Jason and looked up at him with eyes full of admiration and relief. The Weasley twins were waving their arms, still reeling from how oppressive that pressure had been. Ron gaped, his mouth hanging open as he tried to grasp what legend truly meant. He clapped Harry on the shoulder, wanting to say something and not finding the words, so he simply nodded repeatedly. Harry's reaction was more tangled. He stared at Jason, friend, comrade, now leader. Legend was a term normally found in dusty histories and bedtime tales. For Jason to have reached it, did that mean reviving his parents might no longer be impossible? Harry clenched his fists without thinking, his heart pounding. Dumbledore stood a short distance away, his expression composed but his eyes bright. He recognized what Jason's ascent meant. The magical world had gained a solid pillar to rely on. Thoughts of his sister Ariana and the long-buried guilt he had carried stirred as if a chance at atonement had just opened. Snape leaned against the wall, his face its usual mask, but his dark eyes were unsettled. There was shock, unwillingness, envy, and beneath it, a reluctant awe for an ability he himself had never reached. He thought of Lily, and of the secret he'd protected for years. Could this newly minted legend actually pull off what no one in the old stories had managed? They were still basking in hope when a new anomaly rolled over the room like a wave. A wrongness without form wrapped itself around the control room. The warm air chilled, lights dimmed until their brightness was drained. Laughter cut off mid-sound, as if an invisible hand had clasped everyone's throats. An unseen will descended on the heart of the floating city. The City of Dawn's alarm systems registered nothing. The arcane rune shield showed no breach. Yet the cold slipped past every defense and seeped into the bones of every living thing. From Legend Jason to the bent-backed archivist in the corner, from Dumbledore to a dozing owl, everyone felt the same primal terror swell from the depths of their souls, the instinctive dread that faces death itself. All eyes turned to the center of the control room. No fracture tore the space, no energy burst manifested. But within that spot, reality seemed to thin. Light was devoured, sound erased, the sense of being itself unspooled. From that absence, a figure resolved, pure black, as if it swallowed light and hope. 10 meters from Jason, it stood, featureless, more a human silhouette than a person, as if it had stepped out of the very idea of death. Hermione and the others tried to move, but found their bodies unresponsive. Any action felt pointless in front of that presence. Jason recognized the being immediately, the same one he had met before, Death. Though the entity still stood at the peak of the third tier, its aura had grown denser since their last encounter. The divinity that represented death itself brushed the threshold of something higher. It ignored Dumbledore and Snape at the edge of the room. The black outline turned toward Jason, and a voice without gender or inflection spoke directly into the minds of everyone present, cold, hollow, and absolute. Legend, you bear the scent of a world's ascension. You have not made me wait. The voice was empty and precise. Our agreement, let us begin. Fear almost froze everyone's souls, but Jason alone remained steady. His newly born legend domain unfurled automatically, a wash of warm, golden light that pushed back the chill and enclosed his frightened companions. Hermione and the others finally drew breath again. Jason faced the shadow without wavering. His legend aura and the divinity of death met in the space between them, neither yielding. Of course, he replied calm and firm, his words ringing on the mental plane. I keep my promises. He stepped forward, golden eyes unafraid. I will raise this world's energy concentration, refine its rules, lift its standing, and help you advance. In return, you must relinquish the souls you have no right to keep. The silhouette seemed to tilt, like a nod. The cold voice returned, now threaded with a curious verdict. Your growth exceeds expectation, but words alone will not suffice. Prove your worth as a legend and as my partner. Show you can shake a world's foundations. When you pour the first lifeblood into this dying world, when you truly begin its recovery, I will pay the first installment. The terms were blunt and businesslike. Lifeblood, a down payment. Jason understood immediately. Death wanted concrete results, measurable change in the world's core, before it would begin to repay what it owed, the souls trapped within Death's domain. I understand, Jason said. Then I will show you results. The black figure faded slowly, dissolving back into the concept it embodied until it was gone. The bone-deep cold washed away. The lights regained their color. Warm air returned. For a moment, life flowed, as if the terrifying visitation had been a shared hallucination. But the weight of the terms and the lingering chill inside their minds ensured everyone knew it had been real. Harry could no longer contain himself. He dashed to Jason, eyes bright and voice choked with excitement. Dumbledore placed a steadying hand on Jason's shoulder. He said nothing, but his grip and quick breath revealed how much rested on Jason's shoulders. Jason met their gazes and saw the same hunger for what came next. He drew a steadying breath as the new legend power sang through him, filling him with a calm certainty. Everyone, settle down, he said. Hermione, Headmaster Dumbledore, come with me. He turned and headed for the central observation room at the highest point of the City of Dawn. Harry, you too, he added after a beat. I want to show you what a legend truly sees, and where we must begin the first infusion of lifeblood into this world. A chill still hung in the control room after Death had left. Harry and Dumbledore looked at Jason with pleading in their eyes. Jason said little. He led the three of them through several heavily guarded corridors to the central observation room on the top floor of the City of Dawn. It was a vast hemispherical chamber, topped by a single pane of transparent crystal, giving a direct view of the sea of clouds outside. In the room's center, a circular control panel thrummed, countless arcane runes flowing slowly across its surface. 0, Jason said, standing before the panel. Switch to Deep Universe Observation Mode. Yes, Lord City Lord, the Zero Golem answered. The lights dimmed. Where the familiar star map had been, the dome now showed a deep void. Countless glowing filaments wove through that darkness like a gigantic net. At the net's nodes hung spheres of light, some large, some small, in various colors. The largest and brightest was a brilliant blue orb with a tangle of fine lines radiating from it to many surrounding points. What is that? Hermione breathed first, eyes wide, breath quickening. The sight was beyond anything she could easily comprehend. Dumbledore's face was grave. He could feel, in a way that did not rely on sight alone, that the tableau revealed the fundamental rules of the world. This is a sight only legends can see, Jason said, his voice thick with feeling. It's the true shape of our universe. Think of it as a giant server cluster. He pointed at the brightest blue sphere. That is our main world, the core server. Those threads are the network of rules that keep the world running, and the points around it. His eyes gleamed gold. They're countless small worlds and demiplanes, external hard drives attached to the main server. Harry and Hermione understood at once. Death wants me to raise the world's rank, Harry said slowly. That's essentially a version upgrade for our world server to strengthen its capabilities. The simplest way, Jason said, is to import resources from those external drives into the main server. Is that what you mean by living water? Dumbledore asked. Exactly. Jason nodded. Now let's broaden the view. We'll find which external drive is the best candidate for a first superpower bank. He closed his eyes. To Hermione and the others, it looked as if he simply stood perfectly still. But in Jason's perception, his spirit, sharpened and amplified by his promotion to legend, fanned across the void like radar. The distant points resolved into texture and color. Some were translucent blue, pure water element demiplanes. Some pulsed with the green vigor of plant realms. Others were gray and corrupted, like shattered drives full of negative energy. His focus narrowed. An inconspicuous point at the rim of the void flared in his sight, a pure, intense red scorching as the heart of a sun. Found it! Jason opened his eyes. A pure fire element demiplane. It's like a natural nuclear battery, pure violent energy in abundance. He stepped forward and lifted his right hand. Golden arcane runes cascaded into being above his palm, rotating until they formed a miniature three-dimensional magic array. This, Hermione whispered, stunned. Her mind scrambled to make sense of the runes, but the pattern was beyond what she'd seen. The array flared. Jason thrust his hand toward the void and uttered an ancient arcane syllable. Open. The single word carried an almost physical force. Under the three of their astonished gazes, a rift tore open where he had focused. It widened into a stable portal taller than a person, its edges flowing with liquid gold light. Beyond the doorway lay a world of churning magma and unending flame. No land, no sky, only a vast sea of fire. A wave of pure fire element aura surged from the portal like a tsunami. It crushed at their throats. The moisture in the air hissed and evaporated, and the temperature in the observation room shot up. Only because Jason instinctively flared a protective field did they avoid burns. Dumbledore's long beard whipped in the heat, his eyes wide behind his spectacles. The old wizard looked like someone suddenly confronted by a god. To open a stable interdimensional passage with his bare hands, this was godlike power. This was the power of a legend. This was the trump card they needed. The first stable planar passage is established, Jason said calmly. 0. Record the coordinates and begin constructing the energy extraction array. Coordinates for fire element demiplane locked. Energy extraction module construction initiated, the Zero Golem replied. Jason did not stop there. He turned back to the dome, his gaze sharp. One is only an appetizer. It won't be enough. To sate the world and complete this upgrade, we need a feast. He swept his finger across the void. Several other bright points, pure element demiplanes, responded to his will and were marked with glowing golden sigils. The observation dome tracked them one by one. The carnival has only just begun, Jason said. 368. 4 portals opened at once. Death's bargaining chip. The spectacle in the observation room still rang in the air, but Jason didn't pause. His eyes were fixed again on the void shown on the dome, the universe writ small. This time, he didn't bother with the circular console before him. Hermione, Harry, and Dumbledore watched, stunned. Jason reached out with his left hand toward another blank patch of space, and without any elaborate gesture or spell, simply grabbed at the air. Open. The command left his lips like a matter-of-fact order. The void answered. A new rift split open into a world utterly unlike the fire elemental plane, a vast, deep blue ocean, giant whirlpools turning slow and terrible under crushing pressure. A pure water elemental plane corridor had been formed. He didn't stop. Jason pressed his foot gently to the metal floor. Open. Beneath them, the third seam opened soundlessly. Beyond it lay a heavy, dead world of solid stone and packed earth, a pure earth elemental demigod plane. Finally, Jason looked up and exhaled once into the air above. Open. As if responding to a breath, a fourth portal tore open overhead. On the other side, a ceaseless storm raged. a hurricane of azure blades of wind, a raging ocean of storms. A pure wind elemental demigod plane came into being. In less than a minute, 4 portals, like 4 differently hued stars, hung in the corners of the City of Dawn. The roar of flame, the thunder of waves, the slow silence of earth, the shriek of wind. 4 elemental laws forced themselves into the same space. The central observation room, and indeed the whole floating city, hummed under the strain of those clashing forces. Merlin's beard. Dumbledore breathed, bewilderment in his eyes. He had lived for more than a century, and never had his understanding been so thoroughly overturned. Opening 4 otherworldly passages by hand, that was something only a god could do. Hermione gripped Harry's arm until her nails hurt. Her mind was a blank. Nothing in her education or magic could make sense of what she had just seen. Jason caught her look and smiled at her, as if he could read her thoughts. "Broaden your horizons, Hermione," he said. "Don't bind me to your old definitions. From today on, I am knowledge." The arrogance in that claim made Hermione's heart stutter and her cheeks flush. Jason drew his gaze back, his tone sharpening. "Zero, Weasley brothers, to me." He spoke the command to the city's control core. "City of Dawn, center, activate the 4-phase elemental balance conversion array. Open all energy conduits and drain the power from these 4 supercapacitors." Fred and George tumbled in, breathless and wide-eyed after having been terrified outside. "Boss, we're here!" "This is more fun than blowing up Hogwarts," Fred shouted. "Yes, City Lord," intoned the Zero Golem's voice, booming through the city. 4-phase elemental balance conversion array activated, connecting to the 4 great elemental demigod planes. Connection successful. Energy extraction module engaged, 10%, 30%, 70%, 100%. At Zero's command, the City of Dawn became a vast energy converter. Hidden runes along the walls flared to life and wove a golden lattice that covered the entire city. 4 thick rivers of elemental energy were forcibly siphoned from the portals into the city's core. Fire, water, earth, and wind slammed against one another inside the conduits. Scarlet flame, azure titanic waves, brownish rock, and bright wind tearing and colliding in chaotic turbulence. At the heart of the array, however, a golden runic sphere Jason had crafted turned and turned, drawing in the violence. It softened, purified, neutralized, and converted the clashing powers. What emerged from the array was no longer raw elemental fury, but a gentle stream of multicolored magic dust, exquisitely refined. The dust poured down from the floating city and drifted across the magical world. The elemental infusion had begun. The British wizarding world felt the change first. On the old walls of Hogwarts, millennia-dormant runes began to glow, as if waking from a long sleep. At the edge of the Forbidden Forest, Neville, watering his herb beds, watched a devil's snare, long withered to the point of death, push out new shoots almost immediately. In Diagon Alley, an Auror patrolling Nocturne Alley felt something sparkle in the air. He cupped his hand and let a few motes fall into his palm. They melted into his skin, and a warm current eased through him, restoring a fraction of his lost magic. Deep under Gringotts, goblins stirred. Magic in the air thrummed with newfound vigor. Ancient ores suddenly gleamed with their own light. Wizards casting spells everywhere discovered that their magic cost dropped by at least 30%, while the spell's potency remained unchanged. "Merlin, what's happening?" someone cried. "Magic feels easier. I think I could take on 10 at once." Shouts like that echoed across the world. The effect reached beyond the magical community. In London, New York, Tokyo, and other major cities, brilliant auroras bloomed across the sky. In many places, soft, luminescent rain fell. People spilled into the streets, cameras and phones held up. Soon the hashtag Global Mysterious Luminous Rain trended worldwide. Scientists and meteorologists were dragged into emergency broadcasts and could only look puzzled into cameras and say, "This is not scientific." Conjecture ran wild online. Aliens, divine manifestation, a Taoist tribulation joke. On the floating city, Jason watched it all in silence. He felt like a system administrator monitoring global servers. He could see the world's elemental concentration climbing steadily. When that value crossed a threshold, a resonance sounded, not an ordinary sound, but a vibration that touched the soul of every living thing, every stone and drop of water. It was the planet's own consciousness stirring. Gaia, the world's origin, slowly waking and exhaling a satisfied sigh. Magic in the air trembled with delight. In the forbidden forest, long-forgotten flora sprouted anew across land that had slept for 1,000 years. Jason closed his eyes. He was the one driving the world's evolution. That thought gave him a rare, deep satisfaction. He had changed more than a battle or a nation. He had raised the level of an entire world. At that moment, as the world's origin sighed, a cold, familiar will descended again. Jason's eyes snapped open. He did not need to turn to see the shadows writhe and coalesce behind him into a humanoid silhouette. Death had returned. "You've given me a surprise," the cold voice echoed directly into Jason's soul. "In return, this is your first down payment." A shadowy arm, insubstantial and yet unbearably heavy, rose. In its hand hovered 3 fist-sized spheres of soul light, each emitting a soft glow so warm and intimate that it hurt Jason to look. His pupils narrowed. He knew those souls. 2 of them were unmistakable, James Potter and Lily Potter. "Our cooperation has only just begun," Death said, and then his figure dissolved, fading away with the 3 orbs as if he had never been there at all. Jason stood motionless for a long time, the room around him alive with energy and wonder. He turned his gaze to Harry, who buzzed with excitement at the world's change, and looked at him with an expression that was not easy to read. 369. So the soul returns, the light of resurrection. Inside the observation room, the chill in the air had dissipated. Death had kept his promise. 3 soul orbs, each the size of a human head, floated before Jason, the only sources of light in the room. In the background, 4 portals to the elemental planes remained open, their energies drawn into the City of Dawn's magic arrays and condensing into motes of magical dust that drifted down from the underside of the floating city. No one paid attention to that splendor. Everyone held their breath, eyes fixed on the 3 orbs. The first orb glowed a warm orange, carrying a deep maternal love and a will to protect, Lily Potter. The second shone a brilliant gold, full of pride, responsibility, and courage, James Potter. The third was a pure silver white, not harsh in its brightness, but settled with a tranquility born of suffering, Ariana Dumbledore. "Mom! Dad!" Harry's lips moved, but no sound came out. His throat felt blocked. The resonance of bloodlines surged through him. He stumbled forward, knees weak, hands reaching uncontrollably toward the orbs that represented his parents, and tears welled instantly. Dumbledore lost his composure as well. When the silver-white light appeared, the legendary wizard, his appearance restored to that of a 30-year-old, bent his normally straight back for the first time. He felt his sister's soul aura, familiar in blood, unfamiliar in that there was no longer any torment, only peace. She was free. The realization shattered Dumbledore's lifelong defenses. He was no longer an omnipotent figure. He was simply a brother who had spent his life repenting for the mistakes of youth. Tears streamed down his young face. He reached out, then drew his hand back, afraid it might all be an illusion. Dumbledore was the first to recover his voice. "Jason, my child, stop. This requires preparation, perfect vessels, a stable environment, ample energy." Jason cut him off. "Headmaster, that was the price I paid when I begged the world." He turned slowly to the 3 souls, his pure golden eyes steady and confident. "Now I no longer beg." His voice echoed through the observation room. "I am divine grace." He didn't chant or trace any array. He simply extended his hands toward the 3 orbs. This was the authority of a 4th-tier legend. In the past, resurrecting Hermione had been an overreaching act, a weak hand forcing open a door it had no right to. The world had struck back, and Jason had paid dearly, his white hair a warning. Now, as a 4th-tier legend, creation itself fell within his dominion. His actions were decrees. His words were no longer fragile incantations, but commands that bent the laws of heaven and earth. Life remolding, divine boon. The world did not rebel. Instead, the elements responded as if to a sovereign's summons. The 4 planar channels became torrents that converged obediently, eager to answer the call. First, infinite light elements gathered, actively weaving and shaping, constructing 3 flawless white skeletons. Then a surge of water elements formed delicate blood vessels and capillaries, coursing within those frames to simulate a circulatory system. Wind elements followed, turning into gentle breaths that filled chests, constructing lungs and giving first breaths. Finally, dense earth elements condensed into tough muscles and fascia, wrapping the skeletons and shaping bodies. They smoothed into skin, formed hair, eyebrows, nails, everything created in seconds. The entire miracle unfolded in a peaceful golden glow, hidden from view outside the room. Under the astonished gazes of Dumbledore, Harry, Hermione, and the others, 3 vibrant young bodies were instantly fashioned within that divine light. Jason snapped his fingers. The 3 soul orbs, unobstructed, merged into their newborn forms. The moment the souls rejoined their bodies, the observation room fell utterly silent. Then thump, thump, thump! 3 strong heartbeats sounded almost at once, hammering at everyone's eardrums. The bodies had true life. Their chests began to rise and fall steadily. A healthy flush spread beneath previously pale skin. Garments materialized and settled over the reborn bodies as the golden light receded. Lily and James opened their eyes with the dazed look of those who have just awakened. They took in the unfamiliar surroundings, then their gazes fell together on the tear-streaked boy before them. From his emerald eyes, they felt a familiar, deep bond of blood and affection. The silver-haired girl, Ariana, opened her eyes more timidly. Gone were the madness and pain. Instead, there was timidity and curiosity. Her gaze passed over everyone and landed on the man whose face was young, but whose eyes were full of remorse. She did not recognize him, yet she felt an inexplicable closeness. A reunion that crossed life and death had begun. Jason's face paled slightly. Even though the creation had gone as he intended, it had consumed nearly 30% of his legendary power. He looked at the joyful scene, and an unavoidable clarity rose up. Individual power had limits. To protect all of this, to make the world truly strong, he would need an inexhaustible source of energy, for the world and for himself. That thought birthed the next, far grander plan. Floating city, highest conference room. The massive metal table mirrored the sea of clouds beyond the dome. The air was solemn, yet charged with a joy so raw it was almost overwhelming. The joy of lives returned. Harry clung to Lily's hand, as though afraid she would vanish if he loosened his grip. He stared at her warm smile and the reassuring heat of her palm, too afraid to blink for fear it might be a dream. James stood on the other side, his hand settled heavily on his son's shoulder, his expression shifting from bewilderment to a wary, alert calm as he took in this unfamiliar new world and the strange power thrumming through Harry. Ariana, curious as a child, reached out and tapped the cool metal of the table before looking up at her brother. Dumbledore stood behind her, his face reverted to that of a 40-year-old, his eyes soft with cautious affection. Hermione, Snape, and members of the Weasley family were seated along the sides. Hermione's gaze never left Jason, full of trust. Snape, unusually relaxed, leaned back and kept glancing at Lily with an expression that was difficult to read, like a man bracing himself to be overwhelmed by everyone's affection. No one could forget who had made this reunion possible. By unspoken agreement, all eyes fell on the young man at the head of the table. White hair, golden eyes, calm and resolute. Jason allowed the moment to linger just long enough before tapping the table twice. The sharp sound drew everyone to attention. "Welcome home." He smiled and nodded toward James, Lily, and Ariana. Then his expression hardened. Something more serious flashed in his eyes. "Enjoy the reunion while you can. We have a far more pressing problem." His voice was steady and commanding as he swept his gaze over the room. "The resurrection you witnessed came at a cost. That spell consumed nearly 30% of my legendary power." The room fell completely silent. 30%? Harry sprang to his feet, his face draining of color. Hermione caught her breath. She knew better than anyone what that meant. Since Jason had achieved legendary status, his total magical power had been vast. 30% of that was enough to level a medium-sized nation. It was the foundation he had painstakingly built. "I am not omnipotent," Jason said bluntly. "Individual power has limits. I can't resolve every crisis with resurrection. The last time I brought Hermione back, it nearly overdrew my life force. This time, raising 3 people nearly exhausted my core. The enemy will not always give us time to recover." He paused, eyes darkening. "And don't forget my agreement with death. The elemental infusion pulled the world back from the brink, but it's only a first step. It's still far from true ascension, or from aiding death's own ascent, and achieving that would require an unimaginably vast reservoir of energy." "So," he concluded, "the salvation is complete, but our guardianship is only beginning. He rose and walked into the center of the room. We need a permanent solution, something that will protect us and reliably supply energy to this world. Jason swept his hand across the empty table. A flash of light and a three-dimensional star map unfolded, hovering over the metal. In the center floated a blue orb, their world. Around it, 4 luminous points pulsed, connected to the orb by bright conduits. Elemental infusion was only the first step, Jason said, pointing at the 4 nodes. They can heal the world, but their energy will run out. When it does, the world will stagnate again. He traced his finger through the map, across countless tiny planar fragments, until he tapped a distant coordinate at the edge. A blurry but vivid projection took form. Mountains, forests, city-states. This is the other world where Sirius is. I call it the Dawn Kingdom. Everyone's thoughts snapped to Sirius. Gone, but not forgotten. Jason's plan flickered into view. I propose we build a permanent two-way portal between the floating city and the Dawn Kingdom. He announced the name with emphasis, the word reshaping the air around them. I call it the Stargate Project. The word hit everyone like a thunderclap. Even Dumbledore's eyes widened. A permanent bridge between 2 full worlds carried implications beyond imagination. Once the gate exists, we gain far more than energy, Jason continued, his voice bright with infectious conviction. We can create a shared civilization, exchange resources, technologies, and knowledge. The Dawn Kingdom has unique magical minerals and formidable warriors. We have advanced alchemy and arcanists. Together we can complement one another and build mutual strength. The strategy shifted in an instant, from passive defense to active expansion, from taking what they could to cooperating and growing. A short silence broke, then the room erupted with excitement. Boss, does that mean we can go explore the new world and see the Godfather? Fred and George practically jumped from their seats, eyes gleaming with mischief and possibility. It's more than exploration, Hermione breathed, already racing ahead mentally. It's the collision and fusion of 2 civilizations, different magic systems, shared arcane techniques. This could usher in a whole new era of magic. A steady, powerful voice cut through the animated chatter. I may not understand civilization communities or arcane technology, James Potter said, standing. His silence until now had been watchful. Now the old fire of the Auror commander returned to his eyes. He stepped forward and fixed Jason with a firm gaze. But I understand guardianship and security. A Stargate that links 2 worlds is a beacon. Hope, yes, but also a potential highway for enemies. He straightened with practiced authority. My power might not rival your arcane might, but I know how to defend, how to train warriors, how to build defenses. His eyes swept the room and rested on Harry and Ron, full of expectation. Put the security and training for the Stargate on the Hogwarts side under my command. I want to find my place in this new age. Harry looked at his father, eyes bright. Though he'd been resurrected only hours ago, James was already taking responsibility, exactly the man Harry had always believed him to be. Jason regarded James and smiled. Of course, Mr. Potter, a project like this needs an experienced commander. With that, the first official appointment since the resurrection was made. From today, you are Chief Commander of the Stargate Project, codename Gatekeeper. 371, a celestial oracle from the starry sky. On the continent of Aethel, a small frontier settlement had grown into something far greater. Dawnlight Town, once barely surviving the threat of orcs, had annexed the surrounding ruins and wastelands and risen into a true city-state, Dawn City. 30-meter-high obsidian ringed the city, etched with foundational defensive runes, completed under the distant guidance of the Weasley brothers. In the sun, their sigils shimmered with a steady practical magic. Within, wide flagstone avenues crossed in an orderly grid. Dwarf stone houses, human timber buildings, and elven tree dwellings stood side by side in a careful, deliberate harmony that bespoke planning and purpose. At the heart of the city, a tower, 100 meters tall, pierced the clouds, a fusion of Hogwarts-like spires and the rugged megalithic hallways of the north. It was the highest point in the Dawn Kingdom and its power hub, the Regent's Tower. In the great council hall at the top, Sirius Black sat in the main seat, carved from a single giant beast bone. The excesses and madness of his Azkaban years had been worn away. He now wore a tailored black regent's robe, Dawn insignia embroidered on collar and cuffs in gold. His face remained handsome and unrestrained, but the gray eyes that watched over the room were calm, sharp, and possessed a ruler's quiet authority. So the dwarves of Ironforge and the centaur tribes of Greymist Valley are skirmishing over a newly found vein of adamantine. Sirius's fingers tapped the bone armrest in steady rhythm as a travel-worn knight captain bowed on one knee with helmet in hand and reported the news. Both sides are mustering forces, Your Grace. Scouts report small clashes and casualties. If it continues, it could erupt into a full tribal war that sweeps the north. Sirius let out a cold snort. War? Short-sighted fools. He stopped tapping. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop a degree as his voice cut like an axe. There is no need to fear. His tone left no room for argument. Deliver 3 orders. First, dispatch the 3rd Night Order to garrison Greymist Valley at once. Declare the disputed vein a strategic resource of the Dawn Kingdom. Establish a restricted zone and execute without mercy anyone who approaches it unlawfully. Second, summon Master Smith Grim Ironbeard of Ironforge and order him to marshal all dwarf artisans to forge 500 sets of adamantine enchanted plate for the 1st and 2nd Night Orders within 1 month. We will supply the ore. Tell him this is the Sovereign's will and his duty. Third, send envoys to placate the centaur tribes. Promise the 10 most gifted youths of their next generation priority admission to the Dawn Kingdom's Junior Academy to study alchemy and runecraft. He rose from the throne and looked down at the knight captain with cold eyes. Carrot and stick. Tell them I came to impose order, not broker petty squabbles. Every inch of land, every vein of ore in the Dawn Kingdom belongs to the crown. If anyone raises internal strife for profit again, I will string their heads on the walls of Dawn City as wind chimes. Now go. Carry out these orders. Yes, Your Grace, Regent. The captain rose, feeling the full pressure of the command, and left. Sirius leaned back on the bone seat and exhaled. Memories of mischief with James at Hogwarts flickered through him, a private warmth that never lasted long. His responsibilities were heavier now. He guarded what he had built for Jason, for his godson Harry, for a people who depended on him. Then it hit him. Without warning, a vast, cosmic torrent of information crashed through the thickness of the world like a meteor shower of light. A higher dimensional will, an infusion beyond the senses, struck his mind. Sirius's pupils widened to the limit, his body convulsed under the force. He sprang from the throne, bracing himself on the stone map table to keep from collapsing as the torrent unrolled in his head. A blueprint of a design, impossible in scale and precision, unrolled in his mind like a scroll. A great circular gate connecting 2 worlds, the Stargate. One half of the design was an arcane lattice of circuits and runic arrays he had never seen before, delicate and impossibly precise. The other half was a more familiar, ramshackle solution drawn from his world, dragon bone, titan cores, raw strength. The 2 halves merged flawlessly into a single, unprecedented creation that could astonish gods. Jason's voice filled him, no longer a vague presence but a thunderclap in his soul. Sirius, listen, this is our next plan. The resurrection is complete, but guardianship has only begun. We need a bridge that will never fall. The grandeur of the plan and the avalanche of data nearly buckled him. First shock exploded into raw, uncontrollable exhilaration. He knew, with a clarity that made his hands tremble, Jason did not want merely a guarded world. He wanted to link the worlds, to create a civilization that spanned the crystal wall. Someone, Sirius bellowed across the tower. Guards, ring the monarch's bell. Summon the core council of the Dawn Kingdom, every one of them, to the highest hall. Now, the bell tolled, heavy and clear. The kingdom's core power gathered in minutes with a speed that surprised even the old regent. Bishop Marcus, once the humble priest of Dawnlight Town, and now the kingdom's spiritual cornerstone, who revered Jason as a god, arrived at the head of the delegation. Grim Ironbeard himself came in, smelling of coal and metal, his beard singed and eyes alight with obsession for great work and rare ore. Along with them came technical talents and engineers Sirius had found among the tribes, those who could read rune and gear alike. They regarded the regent with awe. In the tower's high hall, he seemed to stand fused with the starry sky behind him. Gentlemen, Sirius said, the words weighted as if he carried the world, I have just received a divine oracle from our sovereign, the 4th-tier legend, the god walking among mortals, Lord Jason Lester. A divine oracle. Bishop Marcus straightened, fingers closing over the new dawn holy emblem at his breast. Excitement brightened his ancient face. Sirius cut through the murmurs and announced the core of the plan plainly. The monarch commands us to build a god gate in the central plaza of Dawn City, a gate capable of connecting to his world. Silence fell so absolute it felt physical. Grimm's wineglass hit the floor and shattered, unnoticed as he inhaled. "You mean a permanent interworld gate?" he managed. "A gate between worlds?" A white-haired elf elder from the misty forest said, voice tight with worry. "Your grace, would this not awaken the old gods slumbering in our world?" Sirius's smile was disdainful. He descended the dice and stood so close to the elf that the air between them seemed to shiver with width of will. The monarch's oracle is the will of the new god. The remnants of the old era are not welcome on a ship sailing toward a new epoch. Then, shifting to the fervor Jason had taught him, he borrowed a line from a distant world and reshaped it for his people. "We choose to build the Stargate not because it is easy, but precisely because it is difficult. Because this goal will test our strength and stretch our craft. Because it is a challenge we accept, refuse to delay, and are determined to conquer." His words struck like molten iron. Where fear had been, a fever of devotion rose. The unease toward the old gods melted into a fierce sense of mission. The room filled with a roar. "For the monarch!" Bishop Marcus and Grimm and the council shouted. Sirius brought them down to the practicalities. Building the God Gate will not happen overnight. The Oracle has pointed us to the first crucial step. He gestured toward the open sky, immense and untroubled. "We must acquire a legendary metal for the gate's fundamental framework, void star iron." "Void star iron?" Grimm repeated, eyes wide with longing. "The bone of stars. The ancients say it forms when a fragment condenses after 10,000 years of void energy in the turbulent currents at the peak of the world's throat, the highest point on the Ethel continent. No mortal craft can reach that height. Dragons even consider it forbidden." "Legends exist to be remade," Sirius said, the House of Black bent to his mouth. "If ordinary means cannot reach it, we will find extraordinary ones. Therefore, by the authority of the Dawn Kingdom, I proclaim the formation of the Sky Knights. Ride the Griffin's roosts, tame the peaks of the wind elemental eagles, subdue the overlords of the air, then fly to the world's throat. For our monarch, for our god, retrieve the first cornerstone of our creation." He drew his sword. The blade caught the lamplight and sent a cold flash across the hall. He lifted it high. "For Dawn! For the monarch!" The hall answered, a torrent of voices as if to tear the tower's dome away. In both worlds, the great gears of a new chapter began to turn. 372, Ghost in the Potion Garden. A thank you, a drop of black tear. The floating city, the city of dawn, was humming with activity. Under Jason's planning and Zero Golem's calculations, work on the Stargate's base had already begun. The alchemy matrix kept producing building materials, and the Golem Legion and wizards laid them out in coordinated waves across the circular plaza at the city's center. The Weasley brothers' alchemy factory ran at full tilt, fabricating custom energy-conducting rune plates one by one. The whole city was invested in the construction. James had embraced his new role as gatekeeper, leading Harry and Ron as they replanned and rehearsed the floating city's defenses. Dumbledore stayed close to Ariana, patiently filling his sister in on how the world had changed. Amid the bustle, Lily Potter found a piece of quiet. Accompanied by Hermione at first, she learned the layout of the airborne city. When Hermione was called away to help design the Stargate's energy circuits, Lily continued exploring alone. She wandered along streets among the clouds, wind on her cheeks, feeling unreal and peaceful. A scent, a layered perfume of strange plants, caught her, tugging her off the main path. She slipped through a translucent energy shield into a valley and stopped, stunned. The place was a miracle of potions cultivation, a vast garden arranged like a living laboratory. Streams ran through the valley, dividing it into microclimates. Gillyweed floated in the water, moonflowers glowed silver in the sunlight, each bloom fuller than any description in the books. Further on, the sight quickened her pulse. "Is that withered bubotuber?" she breathed, pausing beside a marsh where purple shoots were regenerating from tubers, plants that had been extinct in her time. and Dittany fed with dragon dung. The size of these, their potency must be 10 times normal. Is that a weeping Mimblelus Mimbletonia? She murmured. Legend says its sap is the main ingredient for advanced sedatives. It actually exists. Lily, a prodigy in potions, stroked rare leaves with hands full of affection. Everything here was under perfect care, the environment precisely controlled. It would take staggering potions knowledge, patience, and resources to maintain this place. She found herself admiring and puzzling over its owner. Who could be a master of potions to create such a garden? She followed a stone path toward a crystal-clad research institute tucked into the valley's heart. The institute's door stood slightly ajar. Behind it came the gurgle of boiling liquids. Lily hesitated, then pushed it open. The laboratory inside was modern and humming. Rows of self-stirring cauldrons glowed softly. Crystal vessels linked by an intricate web of pipes formed distillation and purification arrays that made her head spin. The air was thick with the scent of 100 ingredients. At the central workbench stood a tall, thin figure in a black robe, bent over a potion. He stiffened at her approach, then turned. Pale-faced, with pursed lips and dark, somber eyes, the man looked about 30. There was a restrained, dangerous energy about him, an aura from his cultivation of the breath of spiritual poison. He was a second-order arcanist whose presence hummed with controlled power. Black eyes, unfathomable. Severus Snape, but not the Severus Lily remembered. This was a stranger and a veteran at once. Their gazes met. For a moment, Lily felt as if the boy she had once known overlapped with the man before her. Snape's face betrayed a storm. The phantom he had loved, lamented, and protected for years, Lily herself, stood alive and real before him. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then clamped it shut. Lily? The name came out ragged. His shock disordered him. His elbow struck a bottle on a nearby shelf. It was a crystal phial of viscous red liquid, like molten lava. The bottle teetered and slid toward the edge. "Be careful," Lily shouted. She knew the material. It reacted explosively on contact with air. Before she could draw her wand, Snape had already moved. He didn't look at the falling bottle. He extended a pale finger toward it. An invisible arcane force, purer than ordinary wizardry, a mage hand, snapped around the phial and arrested it less than half an inch above the floor. The liquid within stilled. With a flick of his wrist, he guided the bottle back in a steady arc to stand upright on the bench. The motion was impossibly fast and precise, beyond the scale of magic Lily fully understood. Snape's face went even paler. He dropped his hand into a fist, then forced his cold mask back on. He turned his head away, unable to keep meeting her eyes, and said in a clipped, brittle voice, "How are you here? This is a restricted area." Lily steadied herself and was not cowed by his reserve. She stepped forward a little, eyes sweeping the lab with wonder. "I'm sorry to have intruded," she said softly, admiration in her tone. "I was drawn by your garden. It's magnificent, Severus." Hearing his name made him tremble visibly. Every muscle tightened. Lily didn't stop. She remembered everything Harry had told her, the secret protections, the hidden sacrifices, and the unacknowledged contributions. Her throat tightened, and her voice shook with the weight of what she knew. "Harry told me everything. Everything. You shielded him from Quirrell's curse. You protected him during the Triwizard Tournament. All these years, everything." Snape froze, like a statue struck in the heart. His greatest secret had been laid bare. Lily inhaled, stepped until they stood a single stride apart, and looked at his pale profile. Then, quietly and with absolute sincerity, she spoke the words he had longed to hear. "Severus, thank you. Thank you for protecting Harry all this time." Those words shattered the defenses he had worn for years. Gratitude, coming from the person he had cherished, could not be measured against the guilt he had borne. His straight back slackened. The stern mask fell away. He turned fully to her, and in his black eyes sorrow, regret, and grievance roiled, slowly giving way to a small, tremulous relief. "I," 1,000 words crowded and condensed into one soundless motion. Then a single, scalding black tear slid down his cheek, silent as it fell, as if carrying away a lifetime of pain. 373. Go deep into the thunderclouds. Hunt the storm eagle king. High above the world's throat, on the storm-tossed continent of Aethel, lay a forbidden zone for mortal life. Leaden gray clouds churned without rest, energy turbulence tearing bottomless rifts between them. Magic lightning darted erratically, each strike booming like the roar of a falling mountain. The air was thin and bitterly cold. The pressure alone could crush ordinary flying machines. At the very edge of that domain of death, a team was assembling. They were the Dawn Kingdom's finest, the Sky Knights. Over 50 griffins beat their massive wings, suspended against the storm. On their armored backs sat the kingdom's knights in heavy plate, long spears and tower shields at the ready, faces set with grim resolve. Flanking the formation rode dozens of wind elf archers atop wind elemental eagles, nimble and practiced, longbows strung and eyes fixed on the lightning-strewn expanse ahead. Leading them stood Sirius Black, wearing a custom flight battlesuit forged for him by Dwarven Grandmaster Grimm. The suit was a dark silver masterpiece of alchemy and runecraft, wind runes carved at the joints for flexibility. A reactor in the chest glowed steady blue, powering shields and systems. Sirius wore no helmet, his black curls whipped in the wind. The youthful arrogance had melted from his face, replaced by the composed bearing of a regent. All units, check shield energy. Alchemy team, confirm collection tools. His voice carried clearly through the comm runes in every helm. First squad reporting, shield energy 98%, status green. Second squad reporting, status green. Wind Elf scouts, clear visibility. Alchemy team in position, Void Star iron drills activated. Sirius stared into the lightning. He could feel the formation of faint starlight gleams in the energy core. Void Star iron, the purpose of this descent. He drew his sword, pointed it forward, and issued the order that had to be kept simple and cold. Everyone listen up. Primary mission, collect. Do not prolong the fight. Assault formation. Charge with me. For the Monarch, the knights roared, voices swallowed for a moment by thunder. His jetpacks flared, and Sirius was the first to drive into the energy turbulence. The Griffin Knights followed, a V-shaped wedge of beasts and riders. Their linked shields formed a moving bulwark that forced a path through the violent air. The Wind Elves weaved around the perimeter, picking targets and watching for flanks. Pressure and chaos slammed into them. The Griffins groaned under the overload, even their mighty lungs strained. Trained to the teeth, they clenched and held formation. 100 meters in, and the floating stones littering the tempest glittered with veins of Void Star iron, visible even at speed. Then the battle changed. Caw! A raw, piercing cry split the air. Shadows burst from the clouds. Storm giant eagles, the storm's true lords. Their wingspans exceeded 15 meters, feathers like hammered steel, each beat hurling razor winds. Talons and wind blades shredded space. The sky erupted into combat. Defensive formation. First and second squads, push forward, shields up. Wind Elves, free fire, aim for eyes and wing joints. Alchemy team, ignore us and begin collection, now. Sirius had become a battlefield commander at that moment, every order crisp. The Griffin Knights slammed their tower shields together, forming an aerial wall that took the brunt of the Eagle's assault. Sparks flew where wind blades met steel. The Wind Elves' arrows, many laced with slowing and paralyzing glyphs, found eyes and joints and broke the giant eagle's rhythm. Sirius moved like a whetted blade along the front. Arcane missiles from his gauntlet blasted a bird that had broken through the left. His longsword flashed and carved a fatal arc for another pressing the right. Under their desperate covering, 3 alchemists reached a large floating rock, dropped their harnesses, and set their handheld Void Star drills singing, the metallic scream of extraction cutting through thunder. Then the storm itself answered. Caw! A deeper, regal cry cut every other sound. From the heart of the clouds descended a colossal shape, twice the size of the other giants, almost 40 meters across. Its feathers gleamed purplish gold, and golden electrical arcs danced along each plume. The Storm Eagle King. Power near the peak of the 3rd tier radiated from it. Its eyes held both ancient wisdom and raw fury. It fixed on the alchemists, opened an enormous beak, and unleashed a golden lightning bolt as thick as a bucket. Sirius's jaw tightened. Ordinary shields would shatter against that strike. He made a split-second decision. Everyone, hold the line. Leave this beast to me. Before the words were done, he dove toward the lightning spear. Mid-flight, his body twisted, and in a flash he became a massive black dog, Padfoot, an animagus, lithe and sudden. As the bolt hissed past, sizzling along singed fur, he twisted out of its path. The Eagle King, missing, screamed and beat its colossal wings. A net of crackling lightning began to spread, aiming to enmesh the black dog. Padfoot's eyes glittered with calculation. At the last instant, he snapped back into human form midair, sealing his left hand and intoning an arcane phrase he had learned from Jason. Weakness ray. A gray beam of corrosive, negative energy struck the Eagle King's chest. The great bird cried out. The lightning that laced its feathers dimmed, and the beast's motion faltered. Sirius seized the opening. His engines howled in overload as he slammed his longsword into the creature's neck. The blade bit only a few inches and stuck in tough muscle with a ringing clang, but the wound sent blinding pain through the king. Then a shout rose across the tumult. "Regent, we got it!" An alchemist bellowed, holding a fist-sized chunk of black metal that glittered with trapped starlight, void star iron. Sirius exhaled. No duel of honor would be won today. He wrenched his sword free, used the recoil to push off, and signaled the retreat. "All units, withdraw! Cover each other, move." They had come for the ore, not for glory. That had been Jason's lesson. The Sky Knights formed a defensive ring around the alchemists carrying the prize and began an orderly pullback through the torn sky. The Storm Eagle King roared and lunged, but the wound slowed it. It could not close the gap. Frustrated, it circled and cried, watching the thieves vanish into the cloud line. Once clear of the worst turbulence, Sirius glanced back. The Eagle King did not follow. It hovered, talons clenched above the Void Star vein, as if guarding something. The sight gave Sirius pause. An unsettling thought took shape, but he pushed it down. He looked at the shining chunk in the alchemist's hands and allowed himself a small smile. "Mission accomplished. Let's go home." "For the monarch," the knights answered, their voices carrying like a promise into the storm. The central square of the City of Dawn carried an atmosphere of solemn reverence. It had been transformed into a vast, legendary-grade alchemical array. Arcane runes were carved into the stone, forming a colossal arcane furnace array whose core node was linked to the floating city's energy hub. Around the array stood Harry, Ron, the Weasley twins, Dumbledore, Neville, and other key figures, holding their breath as they watched a moment that would be remembered in history. James Potter stood at the front of the crowd, pride and worry fighting on his face, his eyes fixed on the figure at the center of the square. At the heart of the array, Jason's white hair stirred though no wind blew. His pure golden eyes reflected the flow of energy and radiated a commanding presence. To Jason's left, Lily Potter wore a pristine white wizard's robe, her emerald eyes narrowed in concentration. Beside her, Snape, dressed in a researcher's uniform, kept a stern face, but his tightly clasped hands betrayed his inner turmoil. Their relationship had changed after that night in the potion garden. Now they worked side by side as technical specialists. A large cauldron floated before them, filled with a bubbling golden magic alloy smelted from rare materials from Hogwarts. Everyone waited for Jason's command. He raised his hand and gently grasped the void before him. Channel, open. The space in front of him rippled like water, and a fist-sized pitch-black aperture, rimmed with silver electricity, hovered steadily in the air. Its other end connected to a distant world. Simultaneously, in Dawn City of that other world, Sirius stood atop the Regent's Tower, exhausted but elated. A similar black aperture hung in his sky. "Monarch, we succeeded," he shouted. He looked at the void star iron in his hand, an object that faintly glowed with starlight as if it held tiny stars within, and with all his strength he hurled it into the channel. The next instant, that head-sized black metal appeared above the central square of the floating city. Light around it seemed to be swallowed. An ancient, weighty aura from another world washed over everyone. "Now!" Jason's eyes flashed, and with his legendary power, he fixed the void star iron steady in midair. "Guide!" Lily and Snape acted at once. Lily lifted her wand and called a surge of life magic. Green vines of living light coiled around the bubbling alloy, lifting it gently. Snape extended long, pale fingers, and threads of arcane energy braided themselves around the molten metal, precisely tuning its internal structures. He brought the alloy into preliminary resonance with the aura of the void star iron. The golden liquid was drawn upward, flowing toward the suspended meteor of void star iron. Just before they met, Jason's voice rang out across the square. "Arcane furnace. Activate. Begin fusion." Boom! The massive array flared into brilliant light. The floating city's core poured power into the array. The city's lights dimmed briefly, then burst back brighter than before. Enormous energy focused on the two materials suspended in air and struck them with tremendous force. The void star iron and the liquid alloy collided. A searing white light exploded outward. Everyone instinctively shut their eyes. A shockwave of power, mixed with the auras of creation and destruction, rippled through the city and made the floating foundations shudder. At the peak of that energy, an unforeseen thing happened. The miniature matter channel, strained beyond anything anticipated, suddenly overextended and tore open. A blurry circular curtain of light, over 100 meters across, unfolded above the city. Harry and the others, blinking away the afterimage, looked up in stunned silence. Through the rippling veil, they saw something none of them had ever imagined. A vast megalithic city, striking and alien, alive with people, humans, dwarves, elves, and others in strange garments, all staring up toward the sky with fear and reverence, as if beholding a miracle. Across the breach in Dawn City, Sirius and the citizens watched a spectacle they would never forget. A giant skylight had opened in their heavens. Through it, they clearly saw an aerial metropolis floating above a sea of clouds, built of white megaliths and crystal, dazzling beyond words. They saw oddly dressed figures moving through its streets, and at its center, a powerful white-haired figure bathed in light. God's kingdom. Bishop Marcus wept, ancient hands sliding him to his knees as he kissed the ground. The world-spanning glimpse lasted less than 3 seconds. As the energy stabilized, the light curtain contracted and with a soft snap vanished. But those 3 seconds had been branded into the souls of every witness in both worlds. Desire and fervor for the Stargate surged to a fever pitch. When the light cleared, something new hung in the air. An arched metal framework about 10 meters long floated where the collision had occurred. It was deep obsidian, mirror-smooth, and within its frame countless pinpricks of light swirled like a contained galaxy. A stable, powerful aura emanated from it, an amalgam of properties from both worlds, yet greater than either. It possessed extraordinary magic resistance and superb conductivity. Its nature was beyond ordinary materials. The foundation of the Stargate, the first framework, had been forged. "It worked!" Hermione cried, rushing forward to hug Jason. Cheers and applause erupted across the square. Fred and George were already arguing excitedly about turning the leftover fragments into invincible protective badges. James proudly patted Harry's shoulder. Father and son both looked at Jason in the center of the plaza, their faces shining with pride. Yet amid the celebration, Jason's brow tightened. At the very apex of the energy surge, something had touched him, a cold, space and time transcending sensation that set his heart racing and stopped the world dead. For an instant, all the cheering vanished. In his legendary grade perception, a shadowy hooded figure flashed across the edge of the square, and an ancient, emotionless voice echoed directly inside his mind. An interesting toy, but too much commotion. Some sleepers do not like to be disturbed. As the voice faded, the chill receded and the cheering rushed back as if nothing had happened. Jason's smile faltered, solemnity flitted across his golden eyes. He understood what that intrusion meant. It was not an illusion, it was a warning, an awareness of death itself. The Stargate project had brushed against an existence far older and far more terrifying than Lord Voldemort, or even the elemental depletion itself. 375, the calm before the storm. Cheers from the central square rolled up into the sky. The first Stargate frame had been completed, and the City of Dawn was bursting with celebration. They had made history. The Weasley brothers, accompanied by a group of elated alchemists, carefully used an anti-gravity array to carry the still glowing frame to a temperature-controlled lab for analysis. But Jason, the architect of it all, did not join the general rejoicing. He dismissed most of the crowd, keeping only the core team, and scheduled a banquet that evening as a reward for their hard work. He was about to head to the lab with Hermione to check the data when an owl with singed feathers dove down and dropped a red envelope at his feet. It was a howler. The letter unfolded in midair, and a magically magnified booming voice filled the square. Cornelius Fudge's red, pudgy face roaring at once. "Jason Lester, what do you think you're doing?" Just now, every ancient energy monitoring crystal across Europe detonated. The ministry has been flooded with reports from Muggle observatories about a supernova. Do you think the sky above Hogwarts is your private playground? Even though we're teaching your arcane now, you can't. The howler's roar faded as the crowd fell awkwardly silent. Those who knew Jason's situation still bristled at Fudge's ill-timed fury. Jason watched the howler burn itself to ash, then turned to Lucius Malfoy, who stood behind him. Lucius, take care of this. Speak to the minister in your most diplomatic fashion. I need at least a month, no interference from the ministry. As you wish, my lord. Lucius bowed, a keen light in his eyes. He recognized another chance to prove himself. Trust me, I'll make them worry about arcane education quotas and business allocations instead of staring at the sky. I'll keep them busy with perfectly reasonable demands and political contributions until they have no time for anything else. After Lucius left, Jason pushed death's warning and the annoyance of the ministry to the back of his mind, for now. He wanted, above all, a peaceful evening with his family. That night, the main hall of the City of Dawn blazed with light. Long tables teemed with delicacies, roasted dragon ribs, platters of exotic fare, cups of heady elven wine. Cheerful house elves bore silver platters among the guests. In this hall, the usual divisions dissolved. Teachers, students, and the core members of the floating city celebrated together, laughter filling the space. At the most prominent place at the long table, Harry Potter sat between Lily and James. In that moment, he looked like any ordinary child, safe between his parents. James was animatedly telling the tale of how he once turned all of Snape's potion ingredients into slugs as a prank, and Harry and Ron were laughing so hard they were nearly in tears. Lily smiled and gently corrected the exaggerated bits, then passed Harry a steak. He ate, listening to his father's antics and his mother's teasing, feeling his eyes sting. This was the scene he had once seen in the Mirror of Erised, and now it was real. A short distance away, Dumbledore held a cup of mead and watched his sister, Ariana, with contentment. She had fully recovered and was chatting with friends, the shadow of the Obscurus gone. Now she smiled shyly and debated loudly with Hagrid about whether mooncalves really liked pumpkins. Seeing her laugh, Dumbledore felt complete. In a quieter corner, Severus Snape sat alone, methodically cutting at his food. A pair of stems clicked as someone took the seat opposite him, Lily. His posture stiffened. The knife and fork hovered. Lily said nothing, only pushed a glass of fine elven wine toward him with a gentle expression. After a few tense seconds, Snape set his utensils down, picked up the glass, and met her steady green eyes. She lifted her cup and said softly, "To the future, Severus." For a moment, something like relief softened the lines in his face, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He raised his glass, and theirs met with a clear clink. They drank. When the banquet wound down and guests drifted away, Jason slipped alone to the highest observatory of the floating city. The dome above simulated a starry night so convincingly the constellations felt close enough to touch. He leaned on the cool white stone balustrade and stared out at the distant spiral of the galaxy, his thoughts on death's warning. The sleeper. What was it? An older deity than the Storm Eagle King? Something so ancient and terrible that even Dumbledore did not know it? He had awakened something by building the Stargate. The road ahead would be far more dangerous than he'd imagined. A cloak scented faintly of lilacs and parchment settled over his shoulders. "The wind's strong up here. Don't catch a cold." Hermione's voice was soft behind him. She slid her arms around his waist and rested her cheek against his back. He didn't turn, but took her hand, drew her around, and hugged her. "Why aren't you asleep?" he asked, voice warm. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I saw you were troubled, so I followed you." He told her everything Death had said about the sleeper, not who it was, not how powerful, only that their work had awakened it and that the path ahead would be treacherous. Hermione listened without flinching. She cupped his face with both hands and made him look at her. Her chestnut eyes shone in the starlight with quiet determination. "So what?" she said, soft but firm. "From the basilisk in the chamber to facing death itself, Jason, haven't we already been through plenty?" She entwined their fingers and squeezed. "Whatever comes next, sleepers, ancient gods, whatever, we'll face it together. You, me, Harry, Uncle and Aunt, Headmaster Dumbledore, Sirius, we're all by your side. You are not fighting alone, Jason. Never." Her words drove the last of his unease away. He pulled her into a tighter embrace. "Thank you, Hermione." They stood together under the simulated stars, holding on to the fragile calm before whatever storm was coming. Chapter 376, Welcome to Our New World. Within a month, both worlds had shifted into high gear. In the floating city, the Weasley brothers' alchemical works and Snape's Potion Research Institute ran day and night alongside wizard engineers and the Golem Legion. Huge amounts of material were shoveled into furnaces, and legendary alchemical arrays hammered and bound frameworks with starlight. In the alternate world, Sirius marshaled the entire Dawn Kingdom's resources. Dwarven smiths worked without rest. Elven druids accelerated the growth of living timbers and vines, and human scholars, aided by the Zero Golem, researched and built the device they called the Gate of Gods. Today, everything was ready. The central plaza of the floating city had been cleared. A black metal ring gate, over 100 meters across, floated above the stone. Inside its rim, there was what looked like a sea of stars, humming with a powerful aura. The plaza's edges were packed with faces from Hogwarts, students, teachers, soldiers, heads tilted, eyes fixed on the gate with a mixture of awe and anticipation. In the Dawn City of the alternate world, a massive circular stone gate stood in the royal plaza. It was carved with arcane runes, dwarven sigils, and elven tracery. Humans, dwarves, elves, and centaurs gathered there, calling it the Gate of Heaven. Beneath the Stargate in the floating city, Jason stood at the center of a control array in a white wizard's robe. Hermione, Dumbledore, and Harry stood behind him, expressions grave. Before the throne in Dawn City, Sirius, dressed in a black ceremonial robe trimmed with gold, stood upon an activation platform fashioned from a giant beast's skull. Through their soul link, the two could perceive each other clearly. They exchanged a look. No words were needed. Both reached out and simultaneously pressed their activation cores. Jason's voice rang across the floating city. "In my name. Open a new era." Sirius's voice exploded across the Dawn Kingdom. The two gates activated at once. Runic lines flared from bottom to top, and brilliant beams of light shot into the sky in both worlds, scattering the clouds. The space inside each ring began to twist. After a breath of darkness, a massive vortex, like a river of stars, swung into being at each gate's center, slowly rotating as countless pinpricks of light flowed within. Through the vortex on the floating city side, everyone saw the scene beyond, a strange blue sky and a vast, rugged stone metropolis on the horizon. The people of Dawn City, looking through their Gate of Heaven, saw a city floating on a sea of clouds, white megaliths and crystal spires unlike anything of the mortal world. After a stunned silence, a roar of cheers erupted simultaneously in both worlds. "A miracle! A miracle! We did it!" Jason watched the steady hum of the Stargate and allowed himself a small smile. He turned to face the force assembled behind him. Leading the vanguard was James Potter, clad in silver armor, eyes steady, now commander of the floating city's 1st Expeditionary Legion. "Father," Jason nodded. James smiled back, then drew his sword and faced the hundreds of wizard soldiers arrayed behind him. "Expeditionary Force, we are the first envoys, the beginning of peace between two worlds, and the sword of the City of Dawn," he shouted. "Follow me." He stepped into the Stargate first, vanishing into the vortex. Harry followed. They passed through a strange energy membrane, and the world changed. Sunlight dazzled. Rugged stone buildings rose around them. Thousands of curious, astonished eyes fell on the newcomers. At the front of the gathered crowd stood a figure in black royal robes, Sirius. He held himself like the heart of Dawn City, a ruler, but also a friend. He looked at Harry and the others with not just regal bearing, but an unmistakable, open joy. Harry stopped and simply looked at his godfather. This was the man who, like Harry, had once lost everything, and who had now risen again in another world and founded a kingdom. Harry felt warmth in his chest. Sirius saw him and James. For a moment, 3 generations of marauders were reunited. Sirius's face broke into that familiar, crooked smile. He stepped forward, embraced James tightly, and clapped Harry hard on the shoulder. "Welcome to our new world." The embrace sealed a new alliance that spanned worlds. Yet nobody in that jubilant crowd noticed what had already begun. The instant the gates opened, a ripple of power, one capable of altering the laws of the world, swept across the alternate world, centered on Dawn City. This fluctuation was stronger than the earlier elemental and material fusions. It reached back, stirring very ancient forces. Deep in an ice-haunted temple in the far north, a crack spidered through a colossal ice sculpture. In the darkness, a pair of ice-blue eyes opened slowly. In the heart of a sea of lava, the slumbering fire monarch on an obsidian throne moved a withered finger. On a floating island, shrouded by an eternal storm, a former god of the sky, bound long ago by chains, felt the laws shift and let out a sound that was almost a roar. Those ancient deities, slumbering or sealed the world's forgotten primal rulers, awakened at that moment. Their wills turned in the same direction, toward the human city called Dawn City. The sleepers death had warned of were stirring. And by opening the Stargate, the protagonist's faction had been thrust, whether they knew it or not, from behind the scenes to the very forefront of the alternate world's divine stage. The Stargate that linked two worlds hovered above the squares of the floating city and Dawn City, its rim humming and glowing. Air, light, and sounds bled through from the other side, mingling in an uncanny way. People expected a full-scale expedition. Instead, Jason's first order stunned everyone, James and Sirius included. No expansion, no conquest, he said. Jason stood on foreign soil, looking past Sirius's fledgling capital to a wide, weed-strewn plain beyond the city walls. He spoke to Sirius beside him as if it were obvious. We'll build a model city here to showcase what Arcane civilization can do. We'll call it Li Guang Enclave. Jason had never intended to conquer by force. His idea was to conquer by example, build, guide, and demonstrate a superior way of life. Sirius paused, surprised for a moment, then understood. Compared with fighting and bloodshed, convincing people through prosperity and technology was a subtler, more effective kind of victory. Under Jason's command, the Enclave project was launched. What followed gave the native peoples of the Ashen Continent a whole new concept of what building a house could mean. The Stargate buzzed as tens of thousands of strange engineering constructs flowed through it and poured onto the plain. On the first day, the Zero Golem coordinated everything. Thousands of heavy constructs, their limbs inscribed with working sigils, cast spells, fossil to mud and mud to stone, to level dozens of miles and lay out streets in hours. Dwarf artisans in the region stood in stunned silence, their hoes and straightedges dropping to the ground. On the second day, prefabricated building modules arrived from the floating city. Arcane alloy blocks, their runes glowing faintly, were lifted by anti-gravity arrays and slotted together with machine precision. Symmetrical, tasteful building skeletons sprang up overnight. On the third night, hundreds of crystalline streetlights along Li Guang Enclave's main avenue all flared at once. The light drove back the darkness and flooded the city like daylight. The brilliance, brighter than moonlight, left onlookers from the old world speechless. To them, this was no mere construction. It felt miraculous. Within days, the prototype Arcane City had taken shape on the once barren land. Automated magic farms tilled and sowed themselves. Clean water gushed from wells bored thousands of meters deep and flowed freely for anyone to drink. Arcane civilization was presenting its power in direct, tangible ways, and this was only the beginning. Once the infrastructure was in place, Hogwarts engineers and entrepreneurs found their openings. Snape and Lily Potter established a joint potion research institute in the Enclave Center, outfitted far beyond the standard Hogwarts labs. Lily's innate talent for potions and Snape's high arcane level let them analyze the properties of dozens of alien plants within days. Within a week, they had their first breakthrough, a dark green draught they named the Barbarian Bull Concoction. A common soldier who drank it would feel his muscles swell within minutes, gaining colossal strength, enough to heft a minecart full of ore with ease. The effect lasted only half an hour and was followed by a brief period of weakness, but the tactical advantage was enormous. After seeing it in action, Sirius ordered 10,000 vials at once from the National Treasury. Snape and Lily's institute began turning a profit immediately. At the same time, Fred and George opened the Weasley Crossworld Wonder Props shop on the Enclave's busiest commercial street. An unmanned Nimbus 2000 display broom circled the shop front, performing breathtaking maneuvers and drawing crowds. When people learned they could buy a flying broom for only a few gold coins, the market erupted. There were extendable ears that could pick up distant conversations, portable swamps that conjured mire inside an enemy keep, skiving snack boxes that emitted peculiar fogs. Many of the Wizarding World's ordinary prankwares became coveted luxuries in a land with little entertainment. Orders piled up. The brothers watched their shop flood with customers and grinned. They were one step closer to their dream of becoming richer than the Minister of Magic. The Enclave's prosperity pulled people in from surrounding towns. Curiosity and the desire for a better life sent waves of residents to the new city of wonders. But innovation and comfort always unsettle entrenched powers. The success of Li Guang Enclave enraged the conservative god priests of the Dawn Kingdom. Their authority rested on fear, tradition, and ritual. The Enclave's lights, running water, and obvious comforts eroded the people's reverence. In a darkened temple in Dawn City, a painted priest wearing animal skins and clutching a bone staff raged at a crowd of zealots. "Look at those outsiders. They bring false light and make you ignore the moon god at night. They give you tasty well water, but it poisons your soul and makes you forget Mother Earth. They are heretics stealing the world's origin. They are demons blaspheming the gods. That glowing city is a trap." Incited by the priest's words, hundreds of followers, clubs and stones in hand, blocked Li Guang Enclave's entrance the next day, stopping caravans and chanting for the expulsion of heretics. A brawl erupted, the first small but ugly conflict between the new city and the old order. Sirius, inspecting the city walls, watched and frowned. He could not move against his own people, yet this was a provocation to Jason's entire plan. It was his first real taste of what it meant to be a king. Before he could decide how to defuse the situation, an intelligence captain came running up and whispered in his ear, "Your Highness Regent, this isn't ordinary zealotry. These priests usually worship different mountain and river gods and don't coordinate. Now they're all singing the same hymn, promoting a single ancient god said to be returning, the Tooth of Serenity." Sirius's pupils pinched into thin slits. This was no mere local trouble. Behind the frantic priests, something older and hungrier had already set its sights on them. 378. God's Declaration. The air at the entrance to the Li Guang Enclave was electric with tension. Hundreds of zealots armed with sticks and stones faced down the guards Sirius had dispatched. The guards, armored in plate, wore expressions of helplessness. The believers' eyes burned with fanaticism. On a high rock behind them stood an old priest who called himself the Tooth of Serenity, shouting curses at the new city in a hoarse voice. "Look, children, every light that shines from that city steals a piece of the world's primal life. It is a sinful fire lit with our descendants' future." In the command room, Sirius watched through a crystal window, his brow drawn tight. The veins on the back of his hand stood out as he gripped his sword. As regent, he could not move openly against his own people, yet their actions were a direct affront to Jason and the Enclave's plans. For the first time, he felt the sting of a ruler's dilemma. He was about to step out himself to put an end to the farce when the sky suddenly shifted. The clear blue turned to gold. Countless golden rays descended from above, bathing the entire Li Guang Enclave in a sacred light. Under that radiance, the arcane streetlights dimmed, and the automated harvesting constructs fell silent. Everyone froze and instinctively looked skyward. High above, a war chariot of light and heat materialized, drawn by two war horses wreathed in golden flame. The chariot itself was an arrangement of pure energy. Wherever it passed, sacred hymns echoed, stirring an instinctive urge to kneel and worship. It came to rest over the Enclave. Standing on the chariot was a handsome man in sun-gilded armor, a sun scepter in his hand. Long golden hair framed a face whose golden eyes held nothing but disdain. A wave of divine might slammed outward from him. The power he released, an incendiary field of energy, pressed down at the level of a peak third-tier legendary archmage. Under the pressure, those inside the Enclave who were not strong enough felt their hearts tremble, their breathing tighten, as if a great stone sat on their chests, compelling them to kneel and surrender. Outside, the zealots and priests erupted into frenzied worship the instant the divine presence manifested. A god, a true god, has descended. Praise the supreme sun god. The divine envoy has come to punish the heretics. Tears of exultation streamed down the old priest's face as he toppled from the rock. He crawled forward, leading the faithful in prostration beneath the chariot, welcoming the divine visitation. The divine envoy did not glance at their adoration. His gaze pierced through roofs and walls, locking instead on Jason, Sirius, and the others in the command room. He did not bother to ask who was in charge. Through divine power, his voice echoed plainly in everyone's ears, cold and judgmental. You insects from another world, daring to steal the world's origin and profane its laws. He jabbed his sun scepter forward. Golden light condensed on its tip and pointed at the stargate in the city's center. I, Kolios, earthly envoy of the sun god, declare my lord's final oracle to you filthy mortals. You will, before sunset today, dismantle that blasphemous creation called the Stargate with your own hands. Then every visitor from another world must bind their hands and walk to the Divine Mountain Temple, 10,000 miles away, to kneel and repent for 10,000 years, to wash away your sins and await my Lord's final judgment. This is the mercy of a god and the only path to your survival, you thieves. Disobey, and this city will be burned. Your bodies will be incinerated, your souls ground to ash. Kolios spoke with brazen certainty, as if his verdict were self-evident. In his eyes, mortals who disrespected the gods were no more than insects, and being judged was already a favor. Inside the command room, Sirius's face was grim, his knuckles whitened on the hilt of his Kingslayer. Harry and James's faces were tight with anger. Magic crackled, casting electric arcs through the air. But Jason's reaction, center of it all, was nothing like anyone expected. He simply looked up at Divine Envoy, his golden eyes unreadable and calm. Then he took a single step forward. A cool, calculating aura, centered on Jason, spread out silently. Where it touched, the rules of the place seemed to be rewritten. Kolios' divine domain, an onslaught of light and heat, shattered and dissipated before that aura. The oppressive weight that had hung over everyone lifted. The heaviness in their chests vanished like smoke, replaced by an almost casual tranquility. Fourth-tier legend. For the first time in this world, Jason openly displayed that level of power. Kolios' expression froze, his pupils narrowed. He felt like a god looking down and finding himself staring up at something older and incomprehensibly vast. The aura that slipped from the other man made the divine power within him tremble. Even more humiliating was the way Jason looked at him, not with hatred, but with cool appraisal, almost faint approval. Through Jason's arcane eye, Kolios' divine power cloak was peeled away layer by layer. Data streamed across Jason's vision. The Divine Envoy's power was composed of innumerable golden divine particles that, through methods of faith resonance, tapped into a massive energy source in a higher dimension, what they called the Sun God, and siphoned power from it. So, Jason murmured, the corner of his mouth lifting, using faith and soul imprint resonance to borrow power from a higher dimensional being. An interesting approach to energy utilization, inefficient, impure, but creative. He tilted his head, meeting Kolios' gaze without a flicker. Sun God, pure, explosive, imitates the nuclear fusion on a star's surface through divine particle resonance. Not a bad idea. A faint hint of pity passed across his gold eyes. But to flaunt light and heat in front of me. He finished quietly, without malice, every syllable a judgment. You are not qualified. You are not qualified enough. Jason's calm words struck Kolios, the divine envoy, like a slap. Kolios was the sun god's agent in the mortal world, a deity in human guise. Wherever he went, people kneeled. No one had ever dared speak to him like that. Fury twisted Kolios' features. Vile mortal, you will pay with the annihilation of your soul for such insolence. He raised the sun scepter and channeled every ounce of his divine power into it. In the name of my lord, the sun god, great sun judgment. The sun emblem at the scepter's tip flared with blinding light. A spear of radiance more than 10 meters thick tore into being. The air around it scorched and warped as it locked on Jason, carrying enough force to vaporize a city. It plunged toward the ground. Jason didn't even shift his stance. He lifted his right hand and lazily pointed an index finger at the descending spear. A complex purple rune flickered onto his fingertip. Disintegration. To everyone's astonishment, the spear froze 100 meters above him. Then the leading edge began to dissolve. The energy that formed it unwound into pale light and heat and simply dissipated into the air, barely warming the atmosphere. In less than a second, Koleos's mighty great sun judgment had been unmade from tip to tail, as if it had never existed. Silence fell. The chorus in the heavens stopped mid-note. The worshippers' cheers choked in their throats. Koleos hung in the sky, arms still extended from his casting, golden pupils blown wide with panic. He felt the connection to his patron severed, ripped away by a force he could not hope to match. He had lost all power. Jason brushed his hands as if dusting them off. He looked up at the terrified divine envoy and clenched his fist. Purple lines of arcane energy bloomed out of nothing, weaving a runic cage around Koleos, his chariot, and his war horses. The cage tightened quickly. Koleos thrashed, but no strength answered him. At last, the entire construct and the helpless envoy within were compressed into a fist-sized purple crystal. Jason waved, and the crystal obediently fell into his palm. Half an hour later, in the highest arcane laboratory of the floating city, Jason, Hermione, Dumbledore, Snape, Lily, James, and Harry gathered around an analysis console. The crystal containing the divine envoy was bathed in scanning rays at the console's center. Data poured across the light screen and assembled into a humanoid energy model under the guidance of the Zero Golem. Dumbledore leaned forward, eyes glittering as he studied the diagram of the divine power structure. Snape, meanwhile, was fixated on the analysis of divine particles and law fragments, as if he'd stumbled onto a new realm of potions. "Everyone," Jason said, "this is what a god is." He pointed to the model on the screen and explained what he'd learned. Gods are special energy beings, conglomerates of law fragments and the power of faith. They don't create rules, they use them. They trade power for faith, forming a self-sustaining cycle. That makes them appear omnipotent within their domains, but in truth they are bound by the laws of the world, unable to transcend them. He let that sink in, then delivered a conclusion that could reshape arcane civilization. So our path as arcanists cannot be the accumulation of faith. That would make us dependent, make us lose ourselves. Our path, Jason said, eyes bright, is to understand, analyze, and through our own knowledge and will master a core concept or authority unique to each of us. I call that arcane divinity. The phrase struck everyone like a charge. Jason continued, turning their newfound theory into actionable plans. Dumbledore, your meditation is the White Hart's ring. You have spent your life protecting Hogwarts and maintaining balance in the magical world. Your natural divinity is guardianship and balance. You would become the guardian of Arcane. Dumbledore's breath caught. A hunger for power kindled in his eyes. Professor Snape, Jason said next, your breath of spiritual poison springs from potions. Potions are fundamentally about transformation. You take herbs and extract medicines. You convert poison into cure, death into life. Your divinity lies in transformation and renewal. You would master the cycles of matter and energy. Snape's usual stony expression softened for the first time. He clenched his fist at the idea of new life, as if he were seeing a version of himself he had never known. Harry, Jason said finally, turning to the young man, your talent is lightning, the clearest, most immediate force of judgment in nature. Your path points to destruction and arbitration. When you condense your divinity, you will be the Inquisitor of Arcane, striking down injustice with thunder. Harry's eyes shone. He instinctively gripped his wand, already picturing himself wielding bolts of judgment. And me, Jason smiled. My direction is creation and knowledge. I will lay the foundations and use understanding to guide us. A new road to godhood, one that could surpass the old gods, now lay out before them. Jason had shifted from arcane explorer to the pioneer of a new era. He softened his smile but became serious. The theory of arcane divinity is one thing. Condensing it is another. It takes tremendous energy and requires a world with more complete, healthier laws as a foundation. He looked around at the gathered friends and colleagues, eyes bright with purpose. So before we go to other worlds, there is something more important we must do. We must upgrade our world first. 380. Go to another world and kill gods in exchange for real estate. Upgrade our world, Jason said in the laboratory. He turned to face everyone on the core team. Dumbledore, Snape, Hermione, and Harry all watched him. Zero Golem projected new images into the air, a complex model of an energy hub. A layered sphere hovered in front of them, wrapped in runic bands and braided with energy conduits. This is the first step of our next plan. I call it the Magical World Ascension Project, Jason said, pointing at the floating model. He made a grasping motion, and the model enlarged, its internal structure rendered in exquisite clarity. Simulated energy beams flowed through it in precise, orderly paths. Its function is simple, but the effect will change everything, he continued. It will draw high-level energy from other worlds through the Stargate, convert and purify it, and then distribute it across the Hogwarts world through a new energy network. Hermione stared at the intricate model and quickly grasped the implication. So this is essentially an artificial raise of our world's magic level, fixing gaps in the laws themselves. Exactly, Jason nodded. Our world, for historical reasons, has incomplete laws, and magical concentration is slowly dwindling. Establishing this magic net core addresses that at a fundamental level. It will let us condense arcane authority across the board. Dumbledore looked at him, stunned. He had devoted his life to the magical world, but he had never imagined a root-level elevation like this. This idea could usher in a new era, was fixated on the energy purification module in the model. He imagined what such high-purity energy could mean for potions, for transformation and renewal. His breathing quickened. What will the purification efficiency be? How will you maintain stability? Theoretically, up to 99.9% purity, Jason said. As for stability, he smiled. That's why we need a team. This will require many people working together over a long time. An alarm suddenly sounded. The Stargate communication terminal linked to the Dawn City of another world sprang to life. The light screen flickered. Sirius Black's face filled it. He wore the Regent's ceremonial attire, and behind him the Dawn Kingdom's War Council room was tense and ordered. His brow was tight. His usual grin was gone. Jason, something's happened, Sirius said, voice low. He didn't waste words. With a gesture, he projected an image of magical energy. In it, the capture of Koleos, the sun god's envoy, flashed by. The scene then cut to a blazing temple. A blurred figure sat on a throne of fire. A voice rang out, carried by divine power to every kingdom that could hear it. It was a declaration of war, a divine declaration of war against the entire arcane civilization. Guests invading other realms, the god intoned. You call yourselves messengers of the arcane, yet you steal a world's origin. The god's words echoed through the laboratory, each syllable heavy with accusation. You steal the foundation of the world, defile the purity of its laws. You are world devourers. Your existence is an insult to life itself. The sun god did not merely rage over its captured envoy. It named Jason and his associates enemies of all worlds. I, the sun god, call upon all allies who stand for order and light to launch a holy war to purge the thieves who stole our home. Target the Dawn Kingdom, kill all foreign invaders, destroy the Stargate, and reclaim our world's origin. The image cut off. For a long moment the lab was silent. World devourers, Harry clenched his fists. He's slandering us. From his perspective, what he says has a point, Jason replied calmly, watching Sirius on the screen. We do extract high-level energy from other worlds. That is, technically stealing. He just chose the most inflammatory term available. On another light screen, Draco Malfoy appeared, face pale. As an intern supervisor in the intelligence department, he spoke quickly. Young master, the situation's worse than we thought. Our intelligence networks across ministries of magic have received copies of that divine proclamation. Zero Golem translated it, and it's already been distributed to all our partners. What? James Potter's face drained of color. This is bad. Won't? No, Uncle, not at all. Draco snapped, voice shaking. They're not afraid. They're furious, and they want to fight. New feeds refreshed across the lab screens. At the headquarters of the International Confederation of Wizards, a white-haired elder slammed his fist on the table, shouting at images of ministers from every nation. Gods, parasites hiding behind worlds, feeding on faith. Who gave them the right to judge us? I propose an emergency session to pass the Interworld War Resource Support Act immediately. Our allies are fighting in another world, dying and sacrificing. We cannot stand idle. Agreed. The French Ministry of Magic agrees. The Magical Congress of the United States agrees. The resolution passed unanimously. At almost the same moment, Mercenary Guild headquarters worldwide issued the highest level of war mobilization. A single red parchment appeared on guild task boards with one word across the top: Expedition. That one order sent ripples through the wizarding communities. For many, it promised merit and coin. For others, it offered the thrill of battle. In a Diagon Alley pub, a bounty hunter who had just cashed in a contract slammed down a glass of fire whiskey, grabbed his staff and shouted, "Enough drinking. Let's go to another world and slaughter gods." Military merits there can be exchanged for floating city real estate. Right, I've wanted to see them with my own eyes, and I heard the local girls are something else. For money, for honor, for the arcane. From Europe to America, from Asia to Africa, tens of thousands of wizards surged toward the nearest transport hubs. Their single destination was the City of Dawn above Hogwarts and the Stargate that led to another world. Under the gods' proclamation, a civilization's expedition had begun. The godly threat did not fracture them. It united them more tightly than anyone had expected. In the core laboratory, everyone watched the intelligence feeds of excited, mobilizing wizards. Jason allowed a slow smile. He looked at Sirius on the screen. "Godfather," he said lightly, "it looks like your side will be busy first." Sirius grinned, unrestrained. "Don't worry. Everything I've set up has been for this day. The Dawn Kingdom will be a hard bone no god can chew through. I'm curious to see if the so-called gods bleed gold." "Very good." Jason cut the transmission and turned back to the team. His gaze moved over Dumbledore, Snape, and Harry, and lingered on Hermione. War accelerates everything and tests everything. The enemy has unwittingly united the world and poured in resources and manpower. We have no reason to wait. He gestured at the hovering model again. Dawn City will handle frontline combat. The floating city will handle logistics and construction. Both projects proceed simultaneously. The Magical World Ascension Project begins now.